Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know you guys have been waiting for the second part of my cells reader to come out, so here it is. Today I'll be showing you the eukaryotic cell, its type, cell structure, and everything about that. Let's get into the video. Eukaryotic cells, unlike prokaryotes, are incredibly complex, and they make up fish, everything in the ocean, and even us, humans, today. They are made up of various different organelles, such as the nucleolus, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and various others, and they all work together to perform one very complex function of keeping us alive. And to give you a sense of scale here, there are 1 trillion cells in our body that are all working to finish this one goal. Now, let's look at the structures that actually help to achieve this goal. Now, before we start actually getting into all of these, first we need to just draw a simple, very generic eukaryotic cell that isn't any specific cell, it just contains the general shape and organelles that we can find. So now that we've pretty much finished our eukaryotic cell in all of its glory, let's start with the 3 most important organelles that we can find inside of a eukaryotic cell. The first one, and the most apparent one in this diagram, is the cytoplasm of the cell. After that comes the control center, which is the nucleus. And lastly is the cell membrane. Now just keep in mind that this cell diagram that I've drawn here isn't exactly for all eukaryotic cells, and we can observe multiple different types of eukaryotic cells present even in our own body with specialized structures. For example, we have neurons with their long branching dendrites and axons that are useful because neurons need to communicate electrical signals with each other, and they can't do that with a rounded body. So as we evolved, neurons evolved to get these dendrites and long axons with axon terminals at the end. Each neuron is around 1 to 1.5 meters in length to communicate information. And another example we can see is the muscle cells, which are more elongated, and they are striated sometimes at the ends, which is very useful if we want to bend them to use, if we wanted to lift something or hold something, we need to flex them, and for that we need striations. So that is another very important evolution. Now, the key components remain the same, except they might be called something different. For example, in neurons, their cytoplasm is called the neuroplasm, and their cell membrane is known as the neurolemma. But in muscles, the cytoplasm is known as the sarcoplasm, and the membrane is known as the sarcomembrane. And eukaryotic cells don't necessarily have to be restricted to mammals, fish, reptiles, the 5 kingdom classification. They can also be found in amoeba with their pseudopodia specialized structure, or in our own body in the form of ciliated epithelial cells, which are very commonly found lining our organs with microhairs called the cilia, hence the name, to protect them from foreign particles. Now that we've looked at the structure and function, let's see the function of all of these organelles, like in-depth function. So the first thing we will be evaluating is the cell membrane. Now, okay, so the cell membrane is very crucial to maintain a separation. Oops, looks like my marker didn't work there. So, the cell membrane is crucial to maintain separation, and the cell membrane is actually made up of a very simple fat known as a lipid. And on the lipids, one end is hydrophilic, which basically just means that it has a high tendency to attract water molecules, and one end is hydrophobic, which means that it has a high tendency to repel water molecules and thus cannot get wet. As I mentioned before, the cell membrane gives us a separation between what's inside the cell and what's outside of the cell. If it wasn't there, all of the cytoplasm, cell membrane, and all of our organelles would just spill out into the open environment, and we'd have no structure, which would be useless if our cell wanted to move or even live. Because life processes, like for example, as I'll explain in a later video, cell respiration, require a definite space to be in, otherwise molecules and particles can easily escape. And we need specific molecules and particles for these life processes. Another key trait of the cell membrane is that it is selectively permeable, which means that it can only allow specific substances that our cells need into the cell. If, for example, we tried to push potassium permanganic heptoxide into our cells, they would probably not accept it because it is not required inside of the cell. And the selectively semi-permeability also allows waste products like carbon dioxide to diffuse out of the cell. Now the next thing we'll be evaluating is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is made up of a chemical known as cytosol, and it is also made up of the very famous cytoskeleton. The cytosol is basically that jelly-like texture that's present in the cytoplasm, and the cytoskeleton, which is inlaid in the cytosol, gives the cell some structure and will also help when the cell undergoes mitosis to create sort of like a definite boundary between the two cells that are formed. Now the cytoskeleton, I'm just drawing it here, it emerges from the back of the nucleus to kind of form this entire spindly web structure, and it covers the entire cell membrane. Until the cell membrane, and it is made up of something known as microfilaments and microtubules. Okay, so those long, sort of tentacle-like structures that you see I've drawn here are the microtubules and microfilaments, and the smaller ones are also microtubules and microfilaments. So basically, microtubules are much smaller than microfilaments, but both together are very crucial for structure. Now, the last thing we'll be looking at is the nucleus. Okay, but first let me just quickly write the function of the cytoplasm here. Okay, so now let's look at the nucleus. Well, you can't see it here because of some unexpected issues. The nucleus is actually very important for the cell. It has many main components. It has the nuclear pores, nuclear membrane, the nucleolus, the DNA, and the nucleoplasm. Now, all of these 5 together have one goal: to make ribosomes. And these ribosomes will leave the nucleus from the nuclear pores. This ribosome will carry out instructions for the rest of the cell to follow. For example, through a process known as transcription, part of our DNA will be converted into RNA, and that RNA will be carried by the ribosome. And for example, if we wanted to undergo cell respiration inside of the cell, the ribosome would take that specific mRNA, the messenger RNA, and deposit it at the ribosome at our mitochondria, and that would read it and turn it into a protein. This process is known as transcription, and this protein would give instructions to the mitochondria to undergo cell respiration in the cell. Anyway, guys, that's all for eukaryotic cells. If you want me to cover any specific topic, leave it in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, and bye-bye.